They trying to get Trump off the ballot. They trying to get Trump off the ballot, y'all. Make sure you hit a like for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications.
Well, Colorado isn't the only state where former President Donald Trump could be barred from the ballot following the historic ruling there.
Now, he faces efforts to disqualify him from the ballot in multiple other states. In California, for example, the state's lieutenant governor called on Secretary of State Shirley Weber to look for every legal option to remove Trump from the ballot, citing the Colorado decision. Similar efforts are playing out in Maine as well.
CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins us now. Olivia, walk us through the effort by the California lieutenant governor to try and remove Trump from the state's ballot. What's going on?
Yeah, hi, Lana and Errol. It's a very unusual situation that's going on in California right now. As you mentioned, she sent a letter to the Secretary of State asking her to look at all efforts, all possibilities in removing Trump from the ballot there. I want to read from the letter she sent. She said, California must stand on the right side of history, and the Constitution is clear. You must be 35 years old and not be an insurrectionist to be on the ballot in that.
Think about what they're doing, y'all. This is not even a democracy anymore. This is not even a democracy anymore. Citing Colorado. Now, I did this whole report, I believe it was yesterday or the day before. And they're doing anything that they possibly can to basically finesse the system to try to prevent this guy from getting into office. They don't even want y'all to decide who the president is. Look, if somebody loses, then they just lose. If they lose, then they just lose. But the other side of it is you can't prevent somebody from being able to get elected by trying to finesse the system. They literally says, word for word, do anything that you can to prevent him from actually being on the ballot. What kind of nonsense is this? Now, on the flip side, and because this has happened in multiple different states, let's cite California, for example, right? Now, the problem with California is that I haven't even seen a Republican win California in my lifetime. So I'm not really sure if that means anything. But what they're doing is they're incentivizing and trying to convince other places, especially in these swing states, from executing and doing the same playbook that Colorado did, especially if you are a predominantly blue state or you have a Supreme Court in that state that leans blue. What the? And they're not even hiding it no more. They're openly finessing by they communicating with each other and they saying, listen, Secretary of State in California, figure out and go through with a fine-tooth comb every single thing that's going on in there and figure out how you can keep this man from even being on the ballot. What? What?
That state. She also mentioned that time is really of the essence here. Even though the California primary is in March, the decision of who must be on the ballot for the primary must be made by December 28th. That's just next week. So time is really of the essence here for the Secretary of State to weigh in on whether or not Donald Trump should be on the ballot in that state and explore other efforts to take him off of it.
And what's interesting as you look at the different efforts from state to state is they're coming forward in different ways. So you have the lieutenant governor looking for an option in California, in Colorado.
I know Mike Jones.
That was a case brought before the court. But the situation, I understand, is different in Maine. Why is that?
Yeah, the situation in Maine is also quite unusual here. You know, a lot of these lawsuits have been brought all around the country asking secretaries of state to really weigh in whether or not Donald Trump should appear on the ballot based on the 14th Amendment. And most of them had said it's not really up to them and they've left the courts to decide for it, but not in Maine. She's been having hearings on whether or not Donald Trump should appear on the ballot there. Of course, Team Trump has argued that it's not really up for a Secretary of State to decide whether or not he should appear on the ballot. I do want to note that her decision was expected to come tomorrow, but now her office is saying that could come as soon as next week.
Well, of course it's going to come as soon as next week, because to make the determination of whether he can be on the ballot has to come before the end of the year. And so now they're racing. It's December 22nd as of the recording of this video, or as of the live stream of this video. And by December 28th, they have to have found every loophole or try to execute on it in order to try to get this man's name off the ballot. What? And see, this is the thing. And when y'all see stuff that happens like this, when y'all see, I know what you're talking about, Tony. When y'all see stuff that happens like this, it's important to nip it in the bud. And the reason why you got to nip it in the bud is because you can't say, well, yeah, Colorado was stupid. No. Now what Colorado did was inspire some place like Maine or California to then leverage their Secretary of State to do some bunch of stuff illegally to try to get him off the ballot. Truth Over Emotion says, when has this ever happened in history? I don't know. I don't think this has ever happened ever in history. This has never happened in history. What are we talking about? What are we doing? What is this country becoming? This is becoming a socialized communist China place that's basically manipulating y'all right in front of y'all eyes, and they don't even have to hide it anymore because you're not even going to get upset enough to do nothing about it. You ain't like you're going to advocate against the Secretary of State in your city. You don't even know. I bet y'all don't even know who the Secretary of State, the people that's over in California. Who's the Secretary of State in California? Most people don't even know who the Secretary of State is in their own cities. Or I'm sorry, not in their own city, in their own states. Most people have no clue who the Secretary of State is, what they do, why their position is important, especially when it comes to the election. More people, listen, y'all got to get involved. Y'all got to pay attention to what's going on.
But the hypothetical being here that if she says Trump should not be on the ballot in Maine, we can fully expect his team to file a lawsuit against that decision. And so it's going to play out in the courts anyways in Maine. But we will be watching for her decision.
Well, I want to ask you about the 2020 election case and special counsel Jack Smith. He's urging the Supreme Court to act quickly on Trump's immunity claim in a new filing. Why does he want the high court to act quickly on this particular question?
Right, of course, as you mentioned, Jack Smith just filed a brief response to the Supreme Court saying that it is in their utmost interest to take up the question of presidential immunity swiftly. In reading from that response, he said a prompt resolution in this case favors an immediate, definitive decision by this court. He also mentioned United States versus Nixon and saying that the stakes in this case are as high, if not higher. Given the expeditious response here, we can anticipate the Supreme Court will make a decision soon on whether or not they're going to take up that issue. But part of the reason here that Smith wants this to stay on the same timeline for the Supreme Court to take this up as quickly is he and other prosecutors have been gathering evidence about Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And they find it imperative that the American voters hear that new evidence before they decide to vote him back into office in 2024 if he is the GOP candidate. And by all means, it looks like he's going to be.
Yeah.
And this is unfortunate because the minute that they start to really fear somebody, that's when they start to tear you down. And they're doing it to a former president. They're doing it to a former president, and they're literally trying to prevent him from even getting on the ballot, or they want to try to sour your thoughts towards him. And this is I have never seen nothing like this in my lifetime. It worries me a little bit. It worries me. It worries me that they're so blatant in it. I know that there's always been underhanded things that's been going on in society for a long time, but give me the choice to be able to choose for myself. It's unfortunate.